What's up, everybody? It's the waitingfornextyear.com podcast. I'm your host, Craig Lindell, and over the next couple of hours, no, the podcast is not going to be a couple of hours long, but I'm going to pop in with some different thoughts over the next couple of hours because I have a 2 hour and 15-minute drive ahead of me, and I'm coming off a week of vacation, and I got a lot of thoughts. I want to talk about sports. I want to talk about music. I want to talk about vacation itself. But first, I'm going to talk about the band Tool. I'm going to talk about music. But more importantly, I'm going to talk about Spotify and streaming music. But before I get there, I want to talk about the Waiting for Next Year podcast network. I don't even know if we're going to call it that, but we now have loose associations with The Nail in the Coffin with Tom Valentino and Travis Yulee. We've got Andy and Jared, Cleveland and Beyond. You've probably heard Andy Billman on this podcast. I want you to find those shows. I want you to subscribe. I want you to shout them out on social media as hey, I just subscribed because of Waiting for Next Year. We don't have any formal business relationship with anybody. We don't have any formal business. We don't make any money. That's really what I'm trying to say. And in addition to those two, you guys heard the Dairy Brothers on this very feed. So I don't want to forget about them. You don't have to do anything special to subscribe to them differently, but they have done, and it's pretty straight ahead Indians talk, but they've done one of the best Indians podcasts I've heard in my entire life. And they've done it right here on this feed for us, for you. It's been awesome, and I really love that we've got so many people doing straight ahead Cleveland sports talking here on this feed. It makes me feel a little bit better about the fact that I can talk about Tool and Spotify. So please subscribe to all those guys, shout them out on social media, tell them you're out there, tell them you're listening. So on Friday, Tool finally decided to put their entire catalog of music in anticipation of their new album, their first new album in like 13 or 14 years. They put all their music on streaming sites. And I'm sure most of you listening, I know not most people in the world have streaming subscriptions, but I'm sure most of the people who listen to this podcast are subscribers to Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google, YouTube Music, whatever they call those different things now in the Google platform. I'm sure you guys are all subscribed, or you have an Alexa that's hooked up to some streaming account. And before this past Friday, you never would have been able to listen to Tool. And that's fine for most of you, probably, or many of you. But for me, that's been a big issue. I'm a giant Tool fan. I've been seeing them live since '93. I think that's when I saw them at Nautica. When my son graduated the first grade, I picked him up from school, drove to Pittsburgh, checked into a hotel, and he and I went and saw Tool in a basketball arena on Pitt Panthers college campus. It was really fun. So I've got this long-standing, kind of deep relationship with the band Tool, their music and their concerts and everything else. But as I gave away all my CDs 5 or 6 years ago. I still have my iTunes library, but I never load it up because I'm on the go. I'm mobile. I'm a Spotify guy. I listen to Spotify. Everything I listen to is on Spotify. And so when I listen to music, it is via Spotify. And Tool has not been there. And so it's kind of created a chasm or it's created a little bit of a rift between me and my fandom of the band Tool because they weren't where I was in terms of me listening. And so they finally joined Spotify, and I understand the early arguments against going streaming. You want people to buy music, but ultimately, whether you want people to buy music or not, they're not. They don't. They're renting it. They're paying subscriptions, or they're listening to Sirius XM, or they're still listening to the radio, but they're not buying music by and large. And yeah, there's a growth in the vinyl market, which is niche. But the days of going to Camelot Music or even the music section of Best Buy let alone Walmart and Target. Those days are gone. Have you noticed those stores keep shrinking their music sales sections? Yeah, that's because nobody's buying. Okay, they're not doing that because people are buying and they're just trying to limit the number of CDs. No, if people were still buying, those sections would grow and grow and grow and grow, but they're not. And so Tool doesn't need your money. Okay, Tool is if they were a mobster, they'd be a made man. You know, they're Metallica. They don't need any more album sales. They sold all their albums. All their albums were released in a time period where people did still buy albums. So they've made all their money. Every one of their albums went platinum, you know, at least once. And Anima is their biggest selling album. That was technically their third album, but for all practical purposes, it was their second full-length album. And that one sold the most. And they've made all the money they ever needed to make. They've done it. So for them to not be on streaming is not a big deal. I get it. It's not a big deal at all. But, so I don't feel bad. Everything we're talking about is free money for Tool, which they don't need. But in terms of being relevant and current and creating an ongoing relationship with a fan base, they were missing out, not to mention the money. So I did some back of the envelope math. This is Sunday, and since they went live on the streaming platform on Friday, and granted there was some pent-up demand just on Spotify alone, they have conservatively 20 to 25 million listens. So like even at a fraction of a penny, we're talking probably $100,000 just from Spotify alone. That doesn't include Apple Music or any of the other streaming platforms. In 3 days, they made an extra $100,000. And it doesn't matter how much money you've made in your entire life and your entire career, or how many albums you've sold, or how much you're going to make on your next tour. If you can make $100,000 from a single platform in 3 days, you're going to do it. You're going to do it. And that's just the side benefit. The real benefit for a band like Tool is they get to be vaunted to the top of the list. They get to be on playlists. They get to be relevant in the current platform, because one of the biggest things that's going on in the streaming services are quote unquote radio stations, which are really just playlists, you know, kind of dynamic playlists, and also kind of the auto playlist where related artists get grouped together. And for the last 10 years or so, as streaming has taken off, when somebody would listen to Chevelle or one of these newer bands that are in that metal, progressive rock genre, melodic, progressive rock, whatever you want to call it, Tool's been left out of the picture. And so their place in history almost gets lost in the culture of music because they're not there. They're not where all the other bands, where all the other people are. And that's a real problem if you want to be a relevant band going forward. Again, we're talking about a band that doesn't actually need anything, so it's not going to harm them. But if you have your choice and you can be relevant and rich and a made man and famous and why would you give anything up? Why would you forego any part of success as a musical artist, whether it's cultural relevance or marginal increase in revenue? Like they were basically just giving away this money, and it was just free sitting there. And now they're going to make extra millions, tens of millions of dollars a year. Again, they don't need it, but beyond that, it makes me feel better about them as a band. They're now where I want them to be. So anyway, it's these are the things that I find interesting. We're going to talk about sports next. I just wanted to give you my thoughts on Tool first. So talk to you in a minute. Okay, so now we're talking about Cleveland Browns training camp. I have not been to a single session. Part of that is selfish because I was on vacation this week. I don't want to take time off of work time away from my family for my sports talk hobby to cover Cleveland Browns training camp. I used to do it, waiting for next year, used to do it as a website. And what I learned most covering training camp is that nothing important actually happens at training camp. And I mean, first of all, that's not even totally true. I'm kind of lying. That was my takeaway for the longest time, was that nothing important happens at training camp. And what I really mean is that nothing important happens at training camp that I can report back to you, that I can see with my own eyes, that I can cover. Training camp is hugely important. It's hugely important to the team, for the guys to get together, for the position battles, for guys to be pushed and challenged and try and earn their position on the team, to relate to coaches, for the coaches to relate, for all those things. But none of those things can happen in front of me on the field to the point where I can tell you with any intelligence that something good or bad is happening. I can't report back to you that Baker Mayfield is meshing with a tight end that he didn't mesh with before, or that the attention being paid to Odell Beckham Jr. is paying dividends to the second and third option in the offense. These are, I mean, I might even be able to report those things, but the fact that David Njoku is getting better because he feels more comfortable with the camaraderie of the receivers room and the tight ends room because of the addition of Odell. Like, there are hugely important things that could pay dividends once we get towards November, December, and towards a playoff push. By attending training camp and sitting along the sidelines with all the other beat reporters, I can't see those things. So there's some cool stuff. I mean, Dan Lobby and Tom Reed and Zach Jackson and some of those guys who do the reporting on individuals, and they give you a behind-the-scenes look at a guy. Like, that stuff is really fun, and it's valuable because it's entertaining and it's compelling and it's interesting, and it might even tell some part of the story of a team on a going forward basis. But it's all part of the entertainment aspect. It's not actually telling you anything about how your team is going to match up with Pittsburgh football later on in the year. It's not actually doing anything from that respect. So from the X's and O's standpoint, and I think it's important to follow guys like Jake Burns, who is out there, and he's telling you some interesting things about what the team's doing on the offensive or defensive line, or things that I don't understand when I look at the football field. But even he would probably admit to you that a lot of the things that he's reporting, based on what the team is willing to show when the team has like 90 players, they haven't even made a cut yet. The value of that information is only marginally valuable. And so while selfishly I'm happy I'm not at training camp, because I mean, it was a cool thing to do, it's fun to be around, but it's only fun to be around in the same respect of you guys going as fans. It's fun to be there and feel like you're seeing something a little bit behind the scenes, because you don't get to see practice. They don't show practice tape on Sports Time Ohio or Channel 5 throughout the year, and you only get limited views of slow motion video by the Browns social team during the year. So you feel like this is your chance to see Browns in training camp and Browns practice. And that's kind of fun, I admit. And being on the other side of those ropes as a member of the media was really fun, but it only has limited value. I'm super excited about the Browns. I'm super excited about everything that they can do this year. I just don't think there's marginal value created by the reporting that happens at training camp. And that's not a shot at the media who are there. Daryl Ryder and all those guys that we're friends with, they do a great job. But take it for what it is. It's entertainment. It's interesting. It's fun because it feeds the excitement for the team. But in terms of providing actual news value, unless somebody gets hurt, not much there. There's not much there. So I will enjoy my time away from camp. All right, talk to you in a minute. So recently I went to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And not that I think that makes me any kind of an expert on anything. It doesn't. It's interesting because, I probably went because I'd heard an interview with somebody from the Hall of Fame on the Nail in the Coffin podcast with Tom Valentino and Travis Yulee. Shout out to those guys. I know I've mentioned them once already today. But, so I was like, you know what, that is a good idea. I'll go down, I'll take my family to Zach Jackson's sponsor, the Honeymoon Grill, and we'll go to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. We'll have a very Akron-Canton kind of a day, and we did. And so I went there, and then all of a sudden, because the Browns decided to put Clay Matthews into the Ring of Honor, it came up again whether or not he belongs in the Hall of Fame, and it's a kind of a dead season in sports other than training camp. So I get it. We talk about Mount Rushmores, and we talk about different goofy things like the Hall of Fame and whether or not somebody belongs in there. Does Clay Matthews belong in the Hall of Fame? And for me, I stopped caring about any of this stuff thanks to John Steiner. He was the one who always told me, like, these things are about entertainment and enjoyment. Nothing else really matters. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. So I don't have to be honest or fair or be like unbiased when it comes to these things. If I want to see somebody in the Hall of Fame, then they belong in the Hall of Fame. So it's really easy for me now. Like, does Clay Matthews belong in the Hall of Fame? Was he a good player, and did he play for one of my teams? Yes, and yes. So yes, he belongs in the Hall of Fame. Does Omar Vizquel belong in the Baseball Hall of Fame? Well, he played defense, and defense is an undervalued. No. None of that stuff. Forget the arguments. Was Omar Vizquel a good baseball player? Yes. Did he play for my favorite team? Yes. Does he belong in the Hall of Fame? Yes. Yes, it's very simple. It's been very freeing for me to have these kinds of things. It even applies to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Does Rage Against the Machine belong in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Well, they were politically important and critically important, and they broke up early. They didn't have the long... No, forget it. Are they a good band? In my estimation, yes. One of the greatest shows I ever went to was seeing them with the Jesus Lizard at James A. Rhodes Arena in Akron. So I love them. They're a great band. Are they a good band? Yes. Are you a homer for them? Yes. I would do anything to see another Rage tour and to have another Rage album. Some of my favorite top 5 songs, top songs of all time are Rage Against the Machine songs. So, do they belong in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Yes. Yes, it's very easy. Do you like them, and are they good? They belong in the Hall of Fame. Now, obviously, you do have to be a little bit honest. Do you like them? Yes. Are they good? If we're talking about Casey Blake, he was good for who he was, but he wasn't good. He wasn't great. Does he belong in the Hall of Fame? No. But, Clay Matthews, Omar Vizquel, Rage Against the Machine, yes, they belong in the Hall of Fame. These are very obvious arguments, okay? Let's not make this complicated. Let's not pretend like the Hall of Fame actually matters. They let more and more people in every year. So unless we're talking about Art Modell and keeping him out, the answer is yes, they belong in. That's it. So unless it's Art Modell, the answer is probably yes. So by now, you've probably all seen the clip of Baker Mayfield losing his mind, pumping up the crowd at the Indians game, a game that was tied 0-0. They went up 5-0 shortly thereafter, shortly after Baker Mayfield fired up the crowd. And look, I'm not trying to take anything away from Baker Mayfield. He is an original. Not everybody can do the things that he does and get away with it. He's sporting a cheesy porn stash. He decides he's going to drink a beer and then put it down, and almost like in a skit, he points to somebody off camera. They toss him a beer. He picks that thing up. He bites it open with his teeth. He shotguns that beer. He tosses it down. He stands up. He turns around. He double thumb points at the Lindor name on the back of his Indians jersey, and the crowd loses their mind. Look, Baker Mayfield is exceptional at what he does. He is a man of the people. He does it as well or better than anybody possibly could. But what I was left thinking about when I saw that is, why is this so hard? Yes, not everybody can do what Baker Mayfield did or what LeBron did during the playoffs. Not everybody has that same character or mentality in them, that ability to captivate an audience or mock themselves, or whatever the things are that allows Baker Mayfield. By the way, my favorite part is at the end of the video where he kind of massages his mustache, almost in a dastardly man, dastardly villain kind of way. But it's the best. It's the best. Not everybody has that. Delhi and different guys who've tried to pump up the crowd have had varying amounts of success doing it. Not everybody is Baker Mayfield or LeBron James. I get it, obviously. And I don't want to take anything away from Baker Mayfield. But if you are even a marginal star athlete in Cleveland, this is the playbook. And it's really not that hard. It's pretty easy. You don't have to do it as well as Baker Mayfield or LeBron James. All you have to be is a homer for us. You have to pretend to like the teams that we root for. And, I know there's a lot of self-hatred in sports fans with, he grew up a Yankees fan. He's a Cowboys fan. He doesn't have to be a fan of the Browns. No, he doesn't have to be. But it's kind of part of the act. It's part of the gimmick. And we fall for it, hook, line, and sinker. It doesn't even have to be genuine. All you have to do is pretend to have fun the same way we have fun with us, not against us or at our expense. Don't show up to our playoff game wearing the opposing team's hat. Okay? It's not that hard. It's just not that hard. And so many athletes have kind of dug their feet in or tried to be right. It's not about that. It's not about that. All you have to do is try and be a man of the people. Just try. Or a woman of the people. Just try. You don't even have to be good at it. But the playbook is easy. Just do it. I mean, Stipe does a great job. He doesn't have as much charisma as LeBron and Baker Mayfield, but he's great. He screams OH, He goes to Indians games. He goes to Cavs games. He tries to pump up the crowd. He's not Captain Charisma. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We love him. We're rooting hard for him, and we will forever. He'll have that job long after his fighting career is over. He'll have that ability to show up places, and people will love him because he's wanted to be part of us. And I know he grew up here, and he was always kind of one of us, but he really plays it up, and he plays it up big, because why not? What's to lose? What's the downside? And it's great to see Baker Mayfield, a kid from Texas who went to Oklahoma, just embrace the Indians and try and be a good citizen like that. The gets us meter is exploding with Baker Mayfield, and it's great. It's great, but it's not that hard. It's hard to do it the way Baker Mayfield does, but it's just not that hard. So I mentioned earlier in this podcast that I was on vacation this week, and for me, vacation anymore means a week up at Chautauqua. That's a little place in upstate New York. There's a lake, and we go to a place called Chautauqua Institution, which is a really, really dumb name for a place because institution, there's a lot of baggage that goes along with that word. But for our purposes, Chautauqua Institution is a place, it's a gated community that has its own symphony orchestra in the summertime. It has a ballet program. It has artists. And all these people come on scholarship and are invited, and they get to hone their craft and practice their craft. And there's a built-in audience for 9 weeks every summer. And you need a gate pass to get in. And that gate pass is your gateway to all the events. And every morning there's a lecture. It's basically, in Chautauqua terms, a lecture is somewhere between an NPR interview and a TED Talk every single morning. And then in the afternoon, they have another one. And so twice a day, 5 days a week, there are concerts every night to varying degrees of entertainment. Sometimes it's the symphony orchestra performing Star Wars along with the movie. Sometimes it's a ballet. So stuff that you may not normally take in, you get a chance to check it out. And that's the cool thing about Chautauqua. Growing up there, I got to see goofy rock bands like Air Supply, adult contemporary weirdos like Johnny Mathis, Peter, Paul, and Mary, but then Bare Naked Ladies and 10,000 Maniacs too, which, nowadays that's kind of whatever. Back in those days, in the 90s, those were really big deals. Those were really cool as a young kid, getting to see those bands up close and getting to see them during my vacation or my summer. So anyway, as I've gotten older, it's been harder and harder to spend time at Chautauqua because of jobs and responsibilities and everything else. But so I spent the entire week up there this week because it was Comedy Week. Jamestown, New York has a museum called the National Comedy Center. It's a really, talk about an out-of-the-way location. People think the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame being in Cleveland or the Football Hall of Fame being in Canton is strange because it's out-of-the-way locations, but the National Comedy Center is truly in kind of the middle of nowhere in Jamestown, New York. But it's an amazing museum. It was endowed by famous comedians like Louis Black. Some of the other names are escaping me, but they fundraise for it, and it is a place that honors all comedy now. I got to see an interview with the Smothers Brothers, hosted by Ron Bennington, maybe my favorite radio guy of all time. The highlight of my week was getting to meet Ron Bennington for a couple minutes, get my picture taken. I never get my picture taken with anybody, but Ron Bennington is one of the most important celebrities in my life. And I use the word celebrity kind of loosely. I've spent more hours listening to the philosophies of Ron Bennington on the radio than maybe anybody in the world. And as much as you can love any stranger or any celebrity, the love that I have for that guy and the enjoyment that he's brought me in my life, to meet him was like the thrill of a lifetime, maybe. The thrill of a decade. I don't know about the lifetime. Having your kids is the thrill of a lifetime. Meeting Ron Bennington is like the thrill of a decade. So anyway, that was really cool. But so Chautauqua is this place, and it's steeped in religion too, and it is very conservative, like small c conservative. I don't mean politically conservative. Politically, it's probably somewhere a little bit over to the left, just a little bit though. Like, it's well representative of the entire nation. It's maybe a little bit liberal if I had to guess, but they're definitely small c conservative. And the average age of the audience going to these lectures was probably 60. And that means there are people who are in their 70s and 80s at these lectures, people with canes, those scooters for people who are too rich to use wheelchairs. So it's Comedy Week, and the one morning it was Louis Black. His name is going to escape me. Robin Williams' longtime manager, and Ron Bennington did an interview talking about the career of Robin Williams. And then on Friday was an NPR female comedian host, I can't remember her name, and then Maria Bamford. And Maria Bamford is like a certifiably crazy person. She has been in and out of mental institutions. She's one of the funniest people on earth. But the number of F-bombs that were dropped during her little interview, it was going to make people's toes curl a little bit. I could tell but that's not. And so I was watching some old people flee the scene with each F-bomb that was dropped in her interview, because at 10:45 in the morning at Chautauqua Institution, with a bunch of conservative LOLs, as my mom calls them, little old ladies, the F-bombs don't go over all that well. So it was for me, it was like cringe radio, cringe comedy, cringe. It was really fun. But then Maria Bamford invited a woman on stage, 75-year-old woman who was starting her stand-up comedy career. She started her stand-up comedy career in January. So 8 months, about 7 or 8 months into her stand-up comedy career, gets invited on stage in front of 4,000 people, somewhere north of 3,000 people, who are already on edge because Maria Bamford's been swearing in front of them. And she did a vulgar 75-year-old woman set about trying to hook up on Match.com and like sex jokes, 75-year-old woman sex jokes. She's talking about how there are different kinds of deal breakers when you're trying to online date at age 75. And she's like, comb over a no-go, but shaved head, I love a shaved head. That's great. Erectile dysfunction, nervous applause and laughter, nervous laughter. That's okay. And the punchline, I hate to give away a comic's punchline, but I have to give it away for the story. She's like, erectile dysfunction is okay as long as he gives good oral. Crickets. I mean, there was some nervous laughter, but in front of a crowd of 70 plus, year old people, this 75-year-old woman in a venue like a morning lecture telling a joke about 75-year-old oral sex. It's just like a lead balloon, man. I could believe it, but considering the venue and everything, it was just shocking. And so now I've got like my hand on my chin. I'm kind of looking around, waiting to see what's going to happen. And to my surprise, like, they hung in there. They really did. They hung in there. Certainly a few more people left, but that was Comedy Week at Chautauqua. Small C conservative Chautauqua with 75-year-old sex jokes to end Comedy Week. What a week. But if you ever get a chance to spend a week up at Chautauqua, pick your theme week and go check it out. See all the interesting things going on. They get Ira Glass was up there this year. They get people from Washington, D.C., political commentary. They get religious people. They get scientists. They had an entire science week. And it's kind of like those lectures were podcasts before podcasts were podcasts. And they're podcasts before the live studio audience. And so it's really interesting that in a time period like we have today, where people are listening to NPR podcasts and science podcasts and true crime, all these different talk genres. Chautauqua has been doing it for 100 years, for longer. They've been doing it forever. And it's a great place for people to get together and converse and have to listen to varying viewpoints and differing viewpoints, even to the point where they're going to listen to a 75-year-old woman do sex jokes and stick and come back. 3,000 to 4,000 people were there for that. So anyway, that was my vacation week. It's not the typical vacation week where you just go chill at the beach. I was going to seminars and lectures and concerts, and it's really fun. And even though it's not Comedy Week, I'm headed back next Friday because comedian Brian Regan is going to be there. I couldn't be more excited for that. It's amazing to me how many people still don't know who Brian Regan is. He's one of the biggest comedians, most successful comedians in the world. But he doesn't have a podcast. Maybe if he had a podcast, more people would know who he is. So, but that was my week of vacation. That's why, among other reasons, that's why you haven't heard much of my voice lately. So, man, that's why I also had this 2.5 hour drive in which to occasionally turn on the mic and talk to you guys. So thanks so much for listening. I love having this audience. I love the fact that you guys are out there. Looking forward to talking Browns with you all season. I'm still gearing up for that Browns season. We'll be talking to you after preseason games, after regular season games. In addition to us, make sure you subscribe to Andy and Jared, Cleveland and Beyond, the Nail in the Coffin podcast, and make sure you give some feedback to the Dairy Brothers, even though they're on this feed and you don't have to do anything else to subscribe to them. Say hey. Also, give a shout out to Dave, because the Browns Friday Fumble, I don't even know if it's coming back. I just kind of assume it might be coming back. We'll see. But it has even more of a chance to come back if you shout at Dave and say, hey, get Dylan off his butt and over to your house and do the podcast. So we'll talk to you next time. Thanks so much for listening. It's been the Waiting for Next Year.com podcast.